Welcome to Garden Wise Adventures. My name is Malie, and today we're on video number 17 of my Beginning Gardener series. Today I wanted to talk to you about how to water your seedlings, all the way from when you plant the seed to when you take it out into the garden to transplant it. So before we get into the specifics of how to water your seedlings, I wanted to talk a little bit about containers. Now there's a lot of different containers that you can use, and you can use anything that is most comfortable for you, but I wanted to go over some of my favorite containers. Now one of my favorite containers is one of the cheapest ones. This is just a pitcher that I've repurposed for a watering container, and I like it because of the spout, and the spout helps direct the water where I want it to go. And it holds a lot of water. Now this isn't good for really tiny seedlings because I can't control the amount of water that's coming out, but anything else it's really good for. Another thing that I like to use sometimes is I will poke holes. I don't know if you can see the holes in the lid here, but I'll poke holes in the lid of some of my water bottles and use these. This gives a nice gentle stream, and it's really good for watering seedlings. Another one of my favorite tools is a turkey baster, and we'll show you this in action a little bit later in the video. But this turkey baster is a wonderful way to get a little bit more water than a stream of water onto a plant, but do it in a gentle manner. So it's very targeted, very gentle, and easy to use. Another container that everybody probably recognizes is this watering can. Now most watering cans have a diffuser at the end, but what I found for indoor watering is that diffuser is a little bit too big and it can scatter water everywhere. So I do have towels on my tables and towels on the floor to capture some of that overflow, but I really actually prefer to take the diffuser off and just use it to pour water into pots gently. One of the main reasons I like it is I have a lot of plants to water, and this does hold a lot of water. Now this container here is one of my favorites for watering seedlings. It gives a really nice gentle spray. It holds a lot of water, so I don't have to refill it very often. And it's got a long hose, so I don't have to carry it or pick it up very often. The only places I have to pick it up for is for my tallest plants. Now this I mainly use for watering the pots that have seeds in them right after I finish planting them, and for watering the brand new little seedlings right after they sprouted. And the reason for that is because it takes quite a water to penetrate down to the bottom of a pot. And if I have a larger pot, it just takes too much time to water with the spray wand. So now that I've covered containers, let's go over some other things that are really important to think about when it comes to watering your seedlings. So the first thing we need to think about is the size of pot we use for each type of plant and each stage of growth. So for example, we have this small pot. Each one of these cells holds a small amount of soil. And the seedling on top is rudbeckia, and it's taking a long time to germinate. If we put the rudbeckia seed in a larger pot, we are going to have to water quite a bit to keep the top of that soil moist. If the top of the soil is not moist, it's not going to germinate. Another issue we might have is if the top of the soil stays too moist, then we are going to have rotted seedlings. Now the depth of the pot also matters. We have little tiny wood betony seedlings here. They're really tiny, and their roots do not reach down to the bottom of the pot yet, so there's no need to have a large amount of soil to water. But here we have a large plant. Now the roots of this plant completely fills out this pot, so we need a larger amount of soil to be able to properly water this plant. We need to be able to support the plant with enough water for it, and a smaller pot is going to constrict the roots and not allow the plant to get enough water. So pot size really helps to effectively water your plants. Now, one of the more important things to think about when watering plants is the type of soil that you use. This is the pot with the little seeds in it that haven't germinated yet that I told you about. And in this pot, we have some seed starting mix. Now, seed starting mix is finer, and it's going to actually hold water a little bit more. And this seed starting mix is made up of peat and perlite. Now, peat holds a lot of water. Perlite adds to the drainage. And that's going to help keep this the perfect amount of moisture so that the seeds can sprout. Seeds need to stay moist at all times. Now this is a little seedling that's already sprouted, and I up-potted this and changed out the soil to a regular potting soil. Now I actually made this soil. This is a coconut coir, compost, and perlite. Now, as I said, the perlite helps with drainage. The coconut coir holds moisture. And the compost adds nutrition and also holds moisture. One thing you need to be really careful of when choosing soil is knowing your plants. There are certain plants that cannot have moisture stay around their roots, or otherwise they'll rot. There are other plants that need more moisture around your roots. So when you're choosing your potting soils, look at the potting soils and think about the amount of drainage that they're going to get. Little cactus seedlings are going to need a really gritty soil mix that drains really rapidly. If you're going to have a banana pup, that's going to need a lot of moisture around the roots. Regular garden plants like these need a moderate amount of moisture. I would choose a potting mix that had either coconut coir or peat moss. Now I found that peat moss tends to hold water a little bit more, but if you choose a regular potting mix, any of the bagged potting mixes are really good. That should be sufficient to hold water for your new plants. Now the next thing you need to understand is the growth stage of your plant and the type of plants you have. Right here I have several different seedlings in different stages of growth. Most of these have just barely sprouted. My ashwagandha sprouted overnight. My leeks have had very, very poor germination, so I still have them in this little tiny seedling tray. And we have stevia and rudbeckia that have not sprouted yet. Now these take weeks to sprout, and I'm still waiting to see sprouts on these. So these pots are segregated from my other pots, and they're watered a little differently. Now one thing to do with seeds to help make sure you don't have to water as often is use a humidity dome. Now this humidity dome will hold in the moisture and hold in the humidity so that the top of the soil stays moist. Never let the top of the soil dry out, but also you don't want to wash out the plants and you don't want to overwater them. Now the way I water these is I just use my little sprayer. You can see how gentle that is. It's got a little bit of air bubbles in it because I just filled it up. But it wets the top of the soil. I check these daily just to make sure they're not drying out. I don't end up having to water them daily, but if they start to dry out a little bit at the top, I make sure to add a little bit of water. I don't feel the need to saturate them to the bottom of the pot yet, mostly because the soil is all still wet and these are just seedlings and we don't want to overwater them. Now what will happen if you overwater little tiny seedlings like this is they will start to grow, and then very shortly after they sprout, they'll start tipping over and you'll start seeing damping off syndrome. Now that's basically when the seedling's roots have rotted, and you definitely don't want that to happen, so you need to be careful of overwatering your seeds. Now the next stage is seeds that have just sprouted where they don't have any new true leaves yet. So these leaves are called the cotyledons, and these are my little pepper plants. You can see that some have sprouted. There are some cells that have not sprouted. There's actually some whole pots that haven't sprouted. Now what I do with these are in a little bit deeper pots because I didn't want to have to pot them up. Now I watch the pots really carefully that don't have any sprouted seeds in them. I look at them every single day, and if they show even a small hint of dryness, I'll just give them a shot of water. I don't water them really deeply. I just make sure that the top stays moist so that little seedling has a chance to sprout. Now for the pots where the seedlings have actually sprouted, I don't want those to dry out, but I also don't want them to stay too wet because of the damping off disease that we've talked about. Now these seedlings are at the stage where they're most susceptible to damping off. So to help prevent damping off, what I do is I will let these seedlings dry out just a little bit, not too much. So I dig down, about a ½ inch. If it's dry down a ½ inch, then I know it's time to water them. Now one thing that I didn't talk about is you can see here, there's vermiculite over the top of the soil. Now vermiculite is a man-made product, and what it does is it will soak up water and it holds the water. This also helps the little seeds not dry out because you have something that is holding water and slowly releasing it. Now if you start seeing green mold over the top, that's a sign that you're keeping these too wet. One thing that really helps is an oscillating fan in the room. This oscillating fan is on a timer and it goes off when the lights go off, so it's about 16 hours a day. So every single seed here has a lot of airflow. Now one thing that you'll also notice is that I have removed the humidity dome off of these. Enough of the seeds have sprouted that I didn't want to hold too much moisture in there to avoid the damping off. So this is the most vulnerable stage for watering and the most difficult. So once again, don't let the pots with the where the seeds haven't sprouted, dry out. Don't let them dry out at all. And try to individually water them. Make sure that the pots that have the seedlings in them dry down about 1/2 inch before you water them. This is a good spot. This is a good place to be able to use my turkey baster, because I can actually put exactly the amount of water that I want in there. It's very gentle and it's not going to disturb these shallow roots. The next stage is the seedlings that have one or more true leaves. Now these plants are just about ready to go out into the garden. They could probably go out into the garden at this stage, but right now we have frozen soil, so they're going to have to wait a couple of weeks. The very, very best way to water these seedlings is bottom watering. So I remove a pot from the tray and I fill the tray up to about that height with water. Then the soil in the pots, each of these pots have holes in the bottom. You can see the little holes in the bottom. The soil will actually soak the water out of the tray and water the plants. Now, these were starting to wilt last night. I wanted to wait today when I was filming to water, but I had to do it last night. And you can see that overnight, that amount of water was completely soaked up. Now, I wait to water these plants until when I lift the pot, it is quite light. I like to let them dry out quite a bit. Plants like this, if there's not a lot of roots in them, sometimes we can get away with only watering them once a week. So I have specific days that I check them to water, which is Thursdays and Sundays, and see if they need to be watered. And I watch them very carefully, because as the roots develop, they use up more water and they end up needing to be watered more often. Now another way to water seedlings like this, and I use it quite a bit, is this wicking mat. Now this mat is on a stand. You can see the stand in there and you can see the water. The mat hangs down into the water, soaks up the water, and then the roots, and then the soil and the roots will take up the water from the wicking mat. And this works really beautifully for a lot of plants, but you need to know your plants and know which ones can tolerate that amount of water. I try to be really careful with seedlings like this. Sometimes they can't tolerate that amount of water, and sometimes they can. You're just going to have to use trial and error to be able to figure out which ones do the best. I found that lettuce seems to be the best on the wicking mats for me. So that's basically what I know about watering plants in a nutshell, or a semi-nutshell, and hopefully that's helpful to you. All you need to do is try different methods, try different schedules, and work out what works best for you. It may take a little while, but after a while you're going to start understanding your plants and know what it takes to help them thrive. So hopefully this video has been helpful to you. If it has been helpful, please like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and you'll have a wonderful garden adventure.